Today we get to talk about one of my favorite lifts. It's not one of the traditional big three, but it's probably the fourth most commonly contested lift, and it is the curl. Okay, I've always loved curls. I don't really see how someone can visualize or see themselves as strong if you don't have strong arms. I grew up watching Arnold and Conan and Terminator, and then Stallone as Rocky and Rambo, and they both had pretty jacked guns. And I was thinking to myself when I was a kid, man, I want my arms to look like that. So I've always been in love with biceps, one of the first things that I did, and it was always reasonably good at them. I set the open national record for the strict curl and held for several years until one of my friends broke it using one of my programs, but that's the nature of training. Okay, that's the way it's supposed to go. So let's talk a little bit about the curl, give you a little more background if you're not as familiar with this lift, especially in terms of kind of an official competitive stance. So first, when you're talking about bicep curls, you want to use the right name for the proper exercise. So we're going to assume that we're using some sort of a bar, right? Of course, there's dumbbell curls, cable curls, stuff like that. But when it comes to competition, we're going to be standing up, and we're going to have three main kinds. We're going to have your standing curl, or what most people just call your regular curl. And that's going to be done with an easy bar. These are all going to be performed with an easy bar. You do not use a straight bar in a competition, which is good because a straight bar is super hard on your wrists when you start to lift heavy. So a little note, if you care about your elbows and your forearms and your wrists, I would discourage you using heavy straight bar bicep curls, even though it's good for the muscle, not good for the joints. So that's why the easy bar was invented, and that's what's used in competition. So we just have the standing classic curl. Okay, that's what you see people do in the gym all the time. Then we have a strict curl. In a strict curl, you put your back up against a wall. So your butt and your upper back is against a wall. Just visualize a bench press that's been tilted up, and you are leaning back against that, and therefore it's very strict. You can't move your body at all. And then the opposite is we have a power curl. And a power curl is where you are intentionally going to use your body to spot yourself. Okay, and really what you're going to do is you're going to emulate a bit of a Romanian deadlift or a kettlebell swing if you prefer. Hopefully you realize those two motions are the exact same. And so what we do here is we incline forward about 10-15 degrees. Okay, so I start forward, and then I'm going to use that powerful hip extension, trunk extension to drive up. I still want to finish pretty straight. Okay, almost under no circumstances do we want to be curling like this. That's going to be pretty rough on the back. But what happens is if you start super straight up, and then when you curl, you start to lean back, okay, that's what's rough. So if you can be leaning a little bit forward, there's nothing biomechanically unsound about this position. So you lean a little bit forward. I kind of visualize like I was doing a tricep push down. So that's your start, and then it's just powerful and up, but then you finish straight. But that can be a lot easier. Now, I remember one of my favorite comments on one of my YouTube videos on the strict curl where I was actually doing the competition is someone was like, "Yeah, it's pretty good weight, but I'd like to see how much weight you could do if you didn't have that wall there to support you." Okay, obviously one of the dumbest comments of all time, and YouTube is full of them. So, of course, curling up against the wall is much, much harder than standing. Even if you intend to be very strict, okay, if you are standing, you will get a little bit of movement there. So, on average, if you're looking at a pretty strictly performed but a standing curl, a freestanding curl, take off 20% of what you lift. That's going to be close to what you do for a strict curl. And then if you do a power curl properly, then add about 20% from your standing curl. So we can kind of have the varies here. So power curl is by far the easiest. And obviously if you really, really swing and turn it into like a clean that's just done supinated, that can be quite different. But still a little bit of motion on that. Standing straight up, and then strict up against the wall. Now somebody may ask, why? Why would we contest a curl? Right? What's going on there? Well, actually, it might be interesting to note that in the very first powerlifting competition, way back when, 50-some years ago, it was actually the curl was in place of one of your key lifts. So then they decided, hey, let's throw the squat in there and let's get rid of the curl, probably for time. But the curl used to be more popular, and so people used to do it in the very first original competitions. Then it's kind of gone out. But the biggest reason why is that in your big three, the main primary muscle that's important that's left out is your biceps. None of the lifts really adequately test your biceps. You might argue lats too in there, so pull up or whatever, but mainly it's the biceps that are left out. So let's see what's going on. And like I said, I think most people kind of have the vision. If you're strong, right? If you feel like you're a powerlifter, I'm a badass, I lift some weight, you got to be able to do some bicep curls too. Okay, it's tough to be like, I'm super strong and you can only curl 50 pounds. Those two are not going to be synonymous. So if obviously we're talking about biceps, but what's really involved? Well, I've got an article online that goes into this in more detail, but I'm going to flesh this out. So we have 3 elbow flexors, muscles that bend your elbow. Of course, you have your biceps. That's the famous one. That's the one you can see that gives you that nice big peak, right? Arnold's real famous. Robbie Robinson probably has the best biceps peak of anybody of all time. So you got your biceps are in there. Then you have your brachialis. Brachialis is a muscle underneath the biceps. It's a workhorse. It's kind of always working. It's primarily hit doing hammer curls, but it's always going to contribute in. And then you have a muscle that actually makes up part of your forearm called your brachioradialis. But even though it's in the forearm, it's not, doesn't cross the wrist, so it doesn't make the wrist move. It continues to help. And your hand position is going to have a pretty big impact. When you do hammer curls, right, so this is a palms up normal curl. This one emphasizes the bicep. Hammer curl emphasizes a lot of brachialis and brachioradialis. And then a reverse curl really puts that emphasis on the brachioradialis. But all 3 are involved. Okay, you're also going to almost always have some shoulder flexion. So the front delt is going to contribute, but it's usually not super excessive. And then your forearm flexors are going to be somewhat involved. Now, they're not hugely involved, but when the weight gets really heavy, people's wrists will want to break. So those forearm flexors are at least going to be a stabilizer. And actually, if you do a really biomechanically proper, or I should say advantageous curl, you'll actually will be flexing your wrist because you're trying to decrease that moment arm. So just like gymnasts when they get on the iron cross will hold like this instead of that, because that changes the range of motion and makes it harder. So when I'm curling up, if I actually curl my wrists on the way up, the bar comes just a little bit closer to the fulcrum, it's a little bit easier. So that's a trick to just lift a little bit more weight. So the rules are reasonably simple. 100% Raw Powerlifting Federation probably contests the curl the most often. It's not included as part of your total. Typically, it's done the evening before a powerlifting competition, but sometimes it's done as it. They tend to do the strict curl. You also have the NASA Powerlifting Federation. They tend to do more of the standing curl. CT Fletcher's actually been coming up with his own, both strict curl, and now there's another power curl organization out there. And NASA, they have something called the Power Sports, which is your curl, bench, and deadlift all put together, which is pretty fun. But assuming we're talking about up against the wall, the rules are pretty simple. One reason why I like this lift is really easy to judge. It's very objective, not that subjective. So your main 2 rules are you put your upper back and your butt up against the wall. So you're leaning up against the wall. Your heels can't be any more than 12 inches away from the wall. They should be spread somewhat, and Tim's tip, definitely spread them like squat stance or wider. That helps prevent the butt from popping up off the wall. Head can do whatever you want. A lot of people get confused when they see the word strict curl. They think that means that somehow you're not supposed to move your upper arm. In no curl federation or no serious curl is there any limit on what's going on here. If you have a big arm and you curl, you're almost for sure going to need to move that arm. So it moves to whatever's comfortable. The only thing that's probably a little bit subjective is the finish point in a curl. But it's usually pretty obvious. Somewhere near the chin, nose, and the bar has stopped moving. So if all I did was just curl it up to here, that would not be successful. But your upper arm can move as much as you want. And again, you're almost for sure going to get some shoulder flexion as you curl up. Your head can move, but your upper back and your butt cannot. On the way up, you almost always cheat by lifting your butt up off the wall, so that's tough. And be careful too on that negative. Remember, you should always be strong in the negative, but when you lower down, you got to keep your upper back against the wall. So practice coming down slow. Don't get sloppy and lose a great lift just because you didn't have good control in that negative. Usually you'll get 3 commands. So generally you'll take the bar off. The bar will be set up on racks. They're going to use easy bars. Now some curl federations allow very weird looking bars. If you have like a hammer style, that in my opinion, that's kind of cheating because that's ultimately the strongest. So you want more of a classic easy bar. I'd prefer the rules to be even more standard in terms of what camber we have. But they will allow you to take either the narrow grip or the wide grip. You can almost always wear wrist wraps, which are suggested on a heavy curl. So I personally went wide, but I've seen great lifters go narrow, so it's kind of whatever you're most comfortable with. So you grab that bar, you take it off, you walk it back, you get set. They're going to give you a start command. You will curl up to the nose. Same general rules. You know, once the bar's coming up, you can't go up and down, right? You can't shimmy it or whatever. It's a strict curl by name. Okay, we curl up. Then once it's here, then they'll give you a down command, just like in the deadlift. So you would lower it down. Okay, you also have to start with your legs totally straight, must stay straight, so you can't like jerk with your legs. Arms start as straight as you can get them, finish as straight as you can get them. And then when you're here, the lift is essentially over. They're going to say rack. As soon as they say rack, you step forward and the lift is officially complete. So it's usually 3 commands on those. If it's a standing curl, and it's just 2, curl and down. Okay, so those are the big rules. I'll include a link to a video that I did of one of my curls. Actually, it was kind of cool. Arnold commented on it, so be sure you watch to the end of that. Kind of a fun one. Now, when it comes to technique, I've been mentioning this a little bit, but the goal, again, is not to keep your elbows, your forearms, your upper arm way jammed back. It's not like a drag curl. So you want to choose that grip that is strong for you. Okay, you do want to have your wrists at least in line, and then preferably flexed a little bit. Okay, I personally like to look down a little bit and then drive my head up as I was curling up. The sticking point is pretty obvious in a curl. It's your midsection. So everybody's going to get it. Don't knock my book over. Okay, I'm too excited. So everybody's going to get it the first, quarter of the range of motion, and almost everyone, once the lift is here, it's up. So it's really driving through this midpoint is going to be the tough part. You have to kind of lean back into it without letting your butt pop off the wall. That's pretty crucial. Okay, there's not a whole lot you can cheat on this one. Also, be definitely aware that 5 pounds makes a huge difference. Curl competitions usually let you go up just by a pound, which I think is appropriate. But I've seen a lot of people that you go up, they think they're doing great. You just go up literally 5 or 10, and it goes from a smooth lift to no chance whatsoever. But remember, percentages, right, it's going to be quite different. You're going to lift the least on this than all the other 3, almost for sure. People often ask me what a good curl is. So just in general for women, of course, it's going to vary somewhat by body weight. But, most women are strict curling. 50 pounds is solid. 70 pounds is quite good. And then a 90-pound strict curl for a female is badass. So that'd definitely be pretty high up. Of course, the lighter you are, the even more impressive it is. And then for men, most men that do a competition are going to be curling 100 pounds. 125 is a pretty good solid curl, and 150 is very good, something to be happy with. 175 is world class, super good. Okay. So that's the breakdown of the curl. It's a fun lift. It's easy to do. It's also very lifter and age friendly. So people start getting older. They start to be banged up for their knees and they can't really deadlift heavy. The curl's an option. The other thing I like about it is almost everyone's curled. Bodybuilders have curled. Everybody's curled, so they can relate to it. So other lifts, people are like, what is that? Or I've squatted, but I don't know what it's like to go all the way down. Most people can relate to the curl. It's super functional. And so I think it's going to become more popular. The competitions are kind of exploding. CT Fletcher certainly helped out with that. So anyway, the curl is pretty awesome. If you want to be strong, you got to have strong arms. Curls are a great way to show that.